It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome to the real public education, Red Eye Radio. Gary?
Yeah, we're looking for a grant.
We're looking for a grant. I'm Eric. He's Gary. You know the drill.
Yeah.
Yada,
Blah,
yada,
blah,
yada.
blah, yada, yada. All right, let's start the show. Blah, 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 yada, yada,
Blah,
yada,
blah, blah, blah. Niceties, blah, blah, blah. We mean it.
Niceties.
Blah, blah,
Yes.
blah. The station that cares. Don't forget your umbrella and your pants.
Well, the first thing I'm looking at, Jim Garrity National Review, Chuck Schumer's Rotten Week, and then the subheadline, Everybody Hates Chuck. Well, come on. We knew this was coming.
Uh-huh.
The guy doesn't even know how to cook a cheeseburger.
It's been clear if you're paying attention.
Yeah. Come on. This guy's completely inept.
You know?
He put the cheese on the burger on a raw burger.
Right. Vegans were like, what's next? You going to be chewing on the side of a cow? What's happening here? That's way too, I, by the way, don't recommend that at all. It's way too crazy right now. It's, but it's, of course, inevitable. Look, part of me thinks, yeah, well, you sided with Trump. And we warned about that days before it happened. You can't do that on anything. A continuing not even a continuing. Here's the thing.
That's still the funniest darn thing all week. It wasn't on abortion. It wasn't on the border. It wasn't on women accepting men's genitals. No. It was a continuing resolution.
I'm pretty sure
That destroyed
AOC
him.
doesn't even know what a continuing resolution is. This is most Democrats don't even understand what the bill was. It was that you voted with Trump and you changed positions because you laid the cheese down too early.
Yeah.
You put the cheese on the raw hamburger, Chuck. You said no. And then 24 hours you said yes. What's next? A MAGA hat with those glasses?
I got a lot of response that so far, that analysis was the best analysis so far.
I
did get a lot of response from our listeners.
It's sad because Chuck has given us some really good audio, but I think that's going to be limited in the future. It's going to be limited in the future.
What was the one?
Aroused?
Oh, the aroused one. That's
Yeah.
right. We're all aroused.
Yeah, look, listen to all of these people that support Trump. They're aroused. And then he starts talking about, then you get all worked up in the gym.
Speaking about
and
that,
all your inhibitions go away while you're pedaling real fast next to a Republican. What?
I haven't heard. Is there still like the MAGA, dating service?
Yeah, I don't
Because
know.
because I wonder is the next
Just
one
for
be
Patriots?
the anti the anti-Musk dating service.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Here's my question. Can they still buy an EV if it's not a Tesla? Because it doesn't matter where you go. At some point, remember, it was Elon Musk that, I don't know if this was a business olive branch, if that's what you would call it, but he said that the other OEMs, because I think it was the Ford CEO that said, we don't have the charging infrastructure, and he was alluding to Tesla, basically. We don't have what the other guys have. And Elon Musk came out then and said, we'd be willing to work with them on things that are compatible, So he kind of was out there throwing that idea. My point is, in the future, it's possible all the charging stations are owned by Tesla. Even if they're not Tesla, specific in terms of, what vehicles they'll charge, it could be a separate, entity in and of itself. Are liberals going to be able to stand that?
Well, you think about this week. Chuck Schumer is now probably the most hated person by Democrats.
Yeah, right.
Secondly,
and Trump is a close second.
Trump's a close second.
Yeah.
But Schumer's leading this week.
Right, yeah.
Trump may go back into the lead next week, but Schumer's leading this week.
Right. Even Department of Education wasn't as big as the continuing resolution for Democrats.
No, the Department of Education, I mean, think about it. The Department of Education. Now, again, there's still a long way to go. You got to get legislation and all the Republicans to vote for it. We'll get to that coming up here in just a little bit. But Schumer is the most hated person by Democrats this week.
Yeah.
The left is committing terrorist acts against electric vehicles and charging stations.
Yeah.
We found out that under the Biden administration that there was a plan, the LNG, shipping the LNG, to actually reduce the amount of carbon gases into the atmosphere, global warming gases into the atmosphere.
By their own standards.
By their own standard, they hid the report so they could continue to put more global warming gases into the atmosphere.
That's right.
Nothing that they do makes any sense at all.
No.
None of it.
It doesn't. It doesn't. And it's because, again, when you go after and attack everything, eventually you get use of nothing. And that's where the left is. Everything we talked about this with it's part of the mindset behind identity politics. If everybody eventually is an oppressor, well, then eventually for them every idea is a bad idea. Everything is bad. And so you can't you get to where you demonize everything and in the end you can utilize nothing. And that's the problem. That's where we're close to that point.
And it wasn't hard to predict this for those maybe, new listeners to the show. And we get new listeners all the time, so we have to make sure that we recap.
Yeah.
But we've, for a long time, talked about identity politics, which is judging people by groups and not individuals, and then the victim-oppressor relationship.
Right.
The Democratic Party keeps wanting to have more victims, therefore they need more oppressors, to the point where eventually the victim or the hero of the victims becomes the oppressor. And now Chuck Schumer finds himself as the oppressor.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer is the one that finds himself the oppressor. This is what liberalism does. This is what identity politics does.
Yep.
This is when you have a political party that simply says we need to find more victims and then more people to blame for those victims. We need to keep expanding that. And what you do, you actually divide one group against another group, and that's not the purpose of a political party. The purpose of a political party is to unite people based on the issues. And the most interesting thing is the person who probably was viewed a few years ago as the greatest divider in American presidential politics actually has united more people.
Yep.
And he's done it on not because of his personality.
No.
He's done it on the issues. And that's what we have told Republicans for the longest time. It is the issues that matter. And the Democrats are not willing to accept that they suck on the issues.
They just can't wrap their mind around it. They can't. They really can't grasp this idea. And I think it comes from, buying into their own hype for so long. Buying into these personalities that, like Obama for them, I think that was the ultimate. That was the peak of personalities in the Democratic Party. And in that, they thought they had won everything forever. They won the conversation, the narrative. They won the White House forever. Some of them thought they thought that at that point they could do no wrong as long as they keep going in the direction that they were going in at that time, which eventually there's no way it doesn't get you to where we are now, where Chuck Schumer's the oppressor. AOC at one point not too long ago was the oppressor. She's going to do something, and it will be a Schumer moment. She'll have her Schumer moment. And, just wait for it. I forget what it was, where they were just screaming at her. The radicals just.
Oh, yeah.
I forget what that
was.
Oh,
remember that she had a town hall meeting. And what were they going after her for?
I forget what it was.
Oh, yeah, that was beautiful.
It was a radical agenda thing. And, and again, she becomes the oppressor because none of it is based on the truth or real issues. When it's based on the truth stays there. It doesn't change. There are two things you can do. You can acknowledge it or not. And that's it. Well, and when you acknowledge it, then you have to deal with it. And that's where we are right now with the second Trump term. That's basically where we are.
You and I, we've always been just fascinated about how they workshop these issues.
Yeah.
For example, they all have to get together and sit around a table.
Yeah.
And think about it. So you had a bunch of Democrats that had to, at one point, sit around the table and say, here's how we can get victory. Here's how we can get and continue to have the working class vote for us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put men in women's sports, and let's allow men to show their genitals to women in the locker room.
Yeah.
That's a winning issue for us. And here's another one. Let's have open borders and let everybody cross the border.
Right. Yes.
That wants to get in here. These are winning strategies for us. They had to sit down, and everybody had to be at that meeting going,
Well, it's the reality setting in because it was this noble idea. If you talk about open borders, they start with what? Sanctuary policy. Well, sanctuary policy. We welcome everyone. And then all of a sudden, thanks to Greg Abbott and also the Biden administration primarily, but Greg Abbott made the headlines, they all did show up. Well, we can't remember the mayor of D.C. We can't handle them. Texas is equipped to handle them. We're not equipped. Nope. This is the way it is. Because again, these noble ideas sound good. They sound good when you think about the we played an audio cut off the air yesterday that somebody was addressing the crash of 2008 and 2009 and the noble idea put in place by Jimmy Carter, put in place by the Clinton administration, but this idea that came about of, getting people out of, poorer neighborhoods and into the American dream of home ownership, and then how the government manipulated all of that and the government-sponsored entities essentially led to the crash of 2008 and 2009. If you watch movies like The Big Short, they're not telling you. The Big Short shorted the story. It didn't tell you the bigger half of it, and that's where it began. And this is a full fact. Without Fannie and Freddie involved, none of that would have happened. Without government involved in that equation, it wouldn't have happened organically between lenders and borrowers, period. But this noble idea, sanctuary policy. We welcome everyone. Hey, what about gang members?
Well, we said everyone.
Most of them. No, remember at first. How dare you? You're calling all of them gang members. No, just the gang members. How dare you? That's racist. And then all of a sudden the gang members show up and people are screaming. And still today, you have liberals fighting to get those gang members who are here illegally back on American soil where they don't belong.
I know. Who was it? Remember when they took over, the Venezuelan gang took over the apartment. Well, it's only one or two apartment complexes.
Right. Yeah.
And was it J.D. Vance?
That was
was
someone. Was it somebody interviewing J.D. Vance?
Yeah. Martha Raddatz.
Was it
Martha Raddatz? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, Martha Raddatz.
And I wasn't sure if it was her or Margaret Brennan, but it was Raddatz.
Easily could have been either.
You're just saying the gangs only took over one or two apartment complexes. Like, you have a foreign gang in the United States taking over apartment complexes, and you're telling me it's only one or two at the moment.
That's the same side.
Are you out of your freaking mind?
That's the same side that said, well, American citizens commit more crimes than people from other countries. The American citizens have a right to be here. They don't have a right to commit those crimes.
Right.
But that was their excuse.
Right. And the point is, but if you don't allow illegal immigration,
crime would be down.
Right. If you vetted people and you went through the entire process, crime would be down. That's the point.
That's the whole point.
It's a dumb the arguments are childish. I mean, they're junior high.
The ratio.
I'm sorry. They're elementary school arguments.
They really are.
866-90 Red Eye.
This report is brought to you by Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. It's not always easy to spring back from the harsh days of winter to warmer months ahead. From de-icing chemicals to hidden debris underneath snow and ice, winter conditions can do serious damage to your truck. Here's a must-do maintenance check to help you minimize downtime and stay rolling. Have your wheel alignment checked to set you up for a safer and smoother ride. Driving with incorrect wheel alignment can result in reduced performance, tread wear, and steering issues. While you're at it, make sure your tires are properly inflated based on the load you're hauling. Underinflated tires can impact your fuel economy and result in blowouts.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So, yesterday, you and I were talking about. I don't know how we got talking about Obama, but it was like, where are the brackets?
Yeah, right.
There's no brackets.
Yeah.
About a half hour before the first game today, all of a sudden, I'm going through X, and there's Obama. Oh, you've been waiting for it. I know I was almost late, but here are my brackets.
Okay.
And so I had to post it on X. I was like, thank God we got the Obama brackets.
Yeah.
And he thinks Duke is going to win. That's really a long shot.
I'm going to put my brackets for this year out in June. June.
I just burst out laughing. It's because I'll never forget when he was president the first time. I've got the brackets.
Yeah.
And it probably was just because it was starting yesterday, the NCAA tournament, and you and I said, where's Trump's brackets? We were just kidding.
Right.
Just in a way mocking Obama. Then 30 minutes before, well, I know you've been waiting for it. Here are my brackets. Right. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Nobody's actually waiting for it.
No, not at all. So the whole Department of Education, still a long way to go before the Department of Education is gone.
Yeah, it's partially dismantled would be the accurate headline.
Yeah, or the initiation is starting as to what to do, but Congress has to do it.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to require an act of Congress.
Yep.
And you know what's interesting is that I think it was the Washington Post. I'll have to get it. Their headline. Well, he didn't dismantle it like he promised in his campaign. It's like they still don't see how big of a move this is. This is a very big move. That you got it this far is a big deal.
Well, he can't dismantle it.
No, it requires Congress.
Right. And so, but he has started, and you've got it in Congress, the Senate, said a couple of leaders of the Senate said, okay, yeah, we got to get on this. So we'll see what happens. We'll get to it coming up here next.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for being here this morning. We've got tons of audio cuts again today, including the highlights in case you missed some of the greatest audio cuts.
Yeah.
Ever this week.
Yeah.
And I know I probably would not call it the audio cut of the week, but the one with AOC where she did the video. Well, okay, hi, everybody, I'm here.
She starts by going,
yeah. But she just said,
I don't know what I'm doing here, but
I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what it's like. What in the and the audio cut? There's a bunch of different audio cuts because the teachers union boss Randy Weingarten said, I guess yesterday, I wanted schools reopened from COVID as early as April of 2020. It's like,
yeah,
it's like,
right.
Do you know how desperate you have to be to say something like that?
To lie that big?
When I don't know what to say. YouTube, maybe it was 2008 where you said, in my mind, you said it first, which was, don't these people realize that the internet exists? And that was like 2008, and all this stuff was still relatively new.
Right.
So don't they know the internet exists? It's like, what? She just got blasted yesterday. She never wanted schools reopened as early as April of 2020.
April of 2020.
She was still fighting for it at the end of 2021, early 2022.
Yes.
It's like, what the?
Yeah.
Stop it.
But why not just pretend it? And I don't know. You know, this is why it's important to remember what Elon Musk said. You are the media. You can fact check anything. We talked about that for years. But they act as if nobody can fact check anything.
I know. Or won't. And it's different these days. People actually do it. That's one thing. Just get off the topic for a little bit. I'm still fascinated at where we're going to go as a nation when it comes to information and how the fact that people get their news from social media and not the standard news sources anymore.
Yeah.
I really wonder how that is going to affect the nation because it affected the 2024 election. You know, you and I had said a ways back when people would call, it was just a few years ago that we were still getting the calls, Republicans can't win because of the media. And we said the media isn't as powerful as it used to be. People are going on the internet. They decide where they get their news from.
Right.
They don't wait for news anymore.
Right.
You know, it's funny when you still see the teases. Well, we have, especially the weather. Well, coming up at 6 o'clock, and it'll be like 3 in the afternoon. Coming up at 6 o'clock, we'll let you know what kind of weekend it's going to be, whether it's going to rain or whether it's going to be sunshine, and you're going to be able to get out there. All coming up, the weather at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Well, anybody sees that, they immediately go online to see, oh, I may have some plans this week. Thanks for reminding me. What's the weather going to be? And they go to their weather app and look at it. It's like, don't do that. You remind people that they don't need to watch you at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it's so people for their news. Now, for example, talk radio's still doing great. Talk radio's doing great because it's exclusive content. Whoever you're listening to or podcast, any your people that you love on the podcast that you listen to, that's unique content because you're not going for the news. You go to see what they think about the news, and you can't get that anywhere else.
Right.
But the news itself, sorry, you can't censor it anymore. You can't hide it anymore, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see where this nation goes, in the next 10 years. But let's get to this from this was interesting yesterday because seemed to be the talking points that were coming out of the left yesterday about Trump initiating the process of getting rid of the education department. But Congress actually has to do it. Yes, it was started by an executive order by Jimmy Carter, but then Congress approved it after that. So this is initiated by Trump to get rid of it, and then Congress is going to have to remove it. But here's Jessica Tarloff and Katie Pavlich yesterday on Fox News.
And when I hear Republicans out there talking about their plan for education in America, I don't hear them talking about making sure disabled kids have access to a public education. I don't hear them talking about impoverished kids.
'Cause we're against it.
I know you are. Thank you for admitting it on such a public forum.
We're going to accuse the Republicans of not caring about disabled kids getting an education or poor kids getting an education. The Biden administration threatened to withdraw funding for student lunches if school districts did not force young women to have men in their locker rooms competing with them. So if we want to talk about those types of things, we can, but that's not what the president did today.
And by the way, the president made it clear, that was the talking point, that after the president spoke on it, and Trump specifically said the money is going to stay there for, that's there, whatever, for K through 12 and for disabled children. Mm-hmm. He specifically said that. Doesn't matter what he says. It's, boom. Okay, what do we have out here? Okay, doesn't matter what he says. Let's pound on this and pound on this and pound on this. Mm-hmm. And then, but it's easy to go and attack them and say, excuse me, this is the president, you're the Democratic Party that said we're going to cut all funding off to school if young girls won't accept male genitalia in the locker room.
All right.
So please, shut up.
Yeah,
on it.
The joint edict between the Department of Education and Department of Justice under Obama, which said students only have to go to the office and tell them, okay, I'm a girl now, and you can't make special arrangements even if they're traveling with a team.
Yeah.
Hotel room.
Yep.
Can't do that. This is our interpretation of Title IX, which means we're abolishing Title IX.
And so this was the Democrats wanting to cut off funding to schools if you did not agree to follow their perversions.
Right.
Their sick perversions. That's where Democrats were on this issue. But eliminating the Department of Education, the goal is not from the Republicans or from the president. And you may have some conservatives out there saying, well, it should be. It's not to cut money. It's not to cut federal money. It's to cut the influence or the demand that there are conditions that go with that money from the federal government. They want it more in block grants where the states actually get to decide. Now, the money would mean that you would have to protect, you cannot, for example, violate somebody's civil rights with that money.
Right.
Or do that, or do something that's unconstitutional. But the whole goal is to get the bureaucracy out of there, the bureaucracy that sets rules. And remember, even initially with the Department of Education, back in the 70s, can you believe it? There was not a Department of Education before that, and yet somehow we survived as a nation.
Yeah.
That's because when it gets to schooling, it's really state and local governments that handle it.
Right.
But the federal government, again, when they opened it, the initial thing was to provide money, but not to set mandates for schools from the federal government, and that's what it became. And so the goal is, no, there's going to be money there. We're just taking out the bureaucracy, and we're going to take out that there are certain mandates if you're going to get this money, to the point of the perversion that it got to under the Biden administration. You don't get the money. You're not going to get school lunch money if you don't allow the perversion of male genitalia in the women's locker rooms. If you do not allow males to play against women in sports, you're not going to be able to get that school lunch money. And that's why conservatives said, got to go. It has to go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's, again, it makes sense to everybody who, is capable of critical thinking. You leave this to the local and state government. You leave it to the federal government and expect agenda to be number one. When the left is in charge, agenda will be number one. Education is not number one. Remember, who was it? One of the heads of one of the top people in the teachers union that stepped down and said, because they were fighting against school choice.
Chancellor in D.C.
Yeah. And she came out and said, the union doesn't care about it. What are we trying to do here? The union doesn't care about education. The union is only here for the union, not for the kids. And you look at the left, they don't care about the actual education. Well, who cares more? Your local leaders. And why is that? Because you can put the pressure on them right then, right there, and just about at any time. Those are the things that matter the most. The federal government involved in your child's education is beyond laughable. It's tragic because it gives you no control. Why in the world would you want to send money to D.C., have it utilized for who knows what? I mean, I just mentioned one thing from the Department of Justice and Department of Education during the Obama years. There's a whole list of those things, by the way. And that govern it so that, yeah, we'll bring in the DOJ to back us up. They're the strong arm here if you want to get in the way. And by the way, parents, if you decide you want to show up to a school board meeting, we'll send FBI agents out there to take down your license plate to make sure we intimidate you and ultimately label you as terrorists for bringing up a concern at a school board meeting. That's what the Department of Education and federalizing all of this has done. So the left needs to spare everybody your excuse, your whining, or anything, because nobody, it's been a joke for the longest time, probably since about the beginning of the Department of Education, of what an actual public education is. You want a real education, give parents choice when it comes to schools. Let them take control of their child's education from day one so they don't have to worry about the left wanting to put obscene material in front of their eyes and creating something also, creating a rift when those kids go home and they're taught all day long. Keep in mind, in public schools, it is the teachers, the agenda, but really the agenda and administrations and the unions who have control of your kids during more waking hours than you have with them during the school year. So are you surprised that they can indoctrinate to no end? And by the way, here's another thing. Not all teachers are on board with this agenda.
No,
some teachers actually care about education. Let's allow locals to decide what the education is going to be.
You know what I love, though? The argument. Well, they're not capable of doing that. You need the expertise of the federal government involved in education.
They think you're stupid. Yeah. Eric Swalwell, you have no place in the child's classroom. After, what's his name, who ran for governor of Virginia? What's his name that got beat? But he was one of the first that said it. How dare you? You don't have a place in your child's classroom.
He lost because of that.
I mean, this is who they are. Yep. They think you're too stupid to know what's best for your own child.
Then only a bureaucrat based in Washington, D.C. has the expertise to ensure that your child gets a great education.
Yes.
We'll talk more about that coming up. 866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. I'm looking at here some of the headlines. How to really shrink the education department. What the plan is. Now, Republicans looking at legislation to dismantle the education department because it was just initiated by the president. He cannot get rid of it. It was just the beginning of it. So that headline that you told me was a stupid headline. Yeah. Because
it's like children are writing it. Let me see if I still have it pulled up. I'm pretty sure it's the Washington Post, but it's like children are, he didn't get what he said he was going to get. He didn't do what he said he was going to do. And then if the executive order would say across the board and without Congress, then they would have come out and said, see, he's a fascist. Well, they can't let him have any kind of win whatsoever, because here's what they know. No one is screaming about this. That has to irritate the radicals on the left.
Well, I mean, they're treating Trump like Schumer.
Exactly.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
How's everybody doing, eh? Good to have you aboard. Welcome
Happy
to a Friday.
Yep. What is going on? It's Friday already. Wow. Okay, we're at March 21st already.
Yeah. It's springtime.
Yeah.
Our weather's going to be really nice.
Is today the first day of spring?
Yeah.
Or was it yesterday?
Yes. Whatever. I don't. It's happened.
Yeah, like we can't say it's springtime unless it's officially happened. It was yesterday. It was oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it happened.
It was the beginning of our last hour yesterday.
Oh, okay.
5:01 a.m. Eastern yesterday. All right.
I've been paying as much attention to when spring starts as I have the NCAA basketball tournament, which
yeah, right.
I can't believe. I used to be addicted to that. I was addicted. I would. It would be 10, 11 o'clock. I'd be ready to. I had cable back then. The other thing is too. So many people have dropped cable. They only have one game on CBS at a time. I mean, they may switch to a couple of games, but they have all these obscure cable channels that maybe 10 years ago people would watch. But how many people have cut the cord? And
I thought about that because
I haven't looked at ESPN Plus, for example,
right,
to see if they were carrying it, whether people would jump on. You pay the $7 or whatever it is a month, $8 a month, and you could watch all of that. They didn't have it,
right?
And I'm like, oh, okay, so you've got to have cable or satellite in order to get the vast majority of the games. I'm like, wow, probably was a smart move 10 years ago or 15 years ago when they did it. But you're really limiting the ability to market who sees it when you're on, True TV or whatever it is. It's just like
if you're not in the streaming game in any kind of sports, whether it's college basketball or professional baseball. In fact, it was the Texas Rangers announced that they had a new streaming deal. And I had never heard of I wasn't familiar with the company they did the deal with. But the difference with baseball is you got thousands of games per season, Yeah, you do. But you've got to go where it's all about the traffic. Where's the traffic in terms of viewership? Well, it's going to be on devices. It's funny, my youngest daughter was telling me about a movie she watched. I said, well, where did you watch that? I haven't seen it on Netflix or anything. I haven't seen it advertised. Where did you watch it? She goes, no, it was on Tubi. I have the Tubi app on my laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. All right.
You have all those.
And I said, do you mind the commercial? She goes, no. That's when I look at my phone and check my messages.
Well, I was talking to communicating with a friend of mine yesterday who really hasn't listened to the show much.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been listening now a lot and going, wow.
Mm.
You really – and isn't it interesting with people that know you personally but have never listened to you?
Yeah.
And then when they do, they're like, whoa, that's you?
Yeah.
Because I don't in my regular life, I hardly ever talk with people about politics unless they bring it up.
I don't even really bring up the show.
Neither do I. It really never comes up.
We're talking, if it's family, we're talking family things. If it's friends, we're trying to get caught up. Because of my schedule, I really don't see my friends a lot. I've got my buddies from Del Rio, and we've had a running group text for over 15 years. Mm-hmm. And, there's that. So we're in contact every day. But if I'm there in person, I'm getting caught. And I don't really talk about things. They'll bring things up like during a political season on that group text. There will be things because they're all, Trump supporters. And I don't even interject in that. If there's a funny line, to interject, maybe, or if somebody asks me a direct question, which is also rare. I would rather sit back and kind of observe the conversation that I'm, that is a normal conversation. And I don't, and then when people, I remember when one of my brothers heard the show for the first time, he was like, I guess I've never listened. He said, and I've been in radio since I was 18. He's only 2 years older than me. And I've been in radio since I was 18, and he's like, I guess this is the first time I've heard you on the radio. And, he enjoyed it. He was complimentary, but it was, it's, my wife listens because my wife, in the work that she does, sometimes she's isolated from the news. She's working a lot. Sometimes it's, almost around the clock. It's late at night. She's working. So while she's at work, she'll put her headphones on when she's in her office, she'll put her headphones on and listen to the podcast during the day. And sometimes when she's awake, if she has insomnia at night, she'll tune in. But most of the time she listens via the podcast. But that's really to kind of get caught up on what things are, what's going on.
Well, this is my buddy Dennis, who I'm known since, probably 19, 20 years of age. And he was referencing something that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, oh, you're listening. And I had just woken up, and I grabbed my phone and was looking at it. And he said, I said, yeah, I'm sitting here doing show prep. He said, was questioning. It's like, the stuff you have to do a lot of show prep for it. And I said, I'm addicted to it. I said, Some people wake up, hopefully not a lot of people, some people wake up and say, where's that line of Coke? I said, I grabbed my smartphone. I said, but it's like an addiction. As soon as I get up, I have to know what's going on. It really is like, I need to know what's going on. And I guess that's a healthy thing, though, because it is the quest for knowledge, but I don't like the addiction part of it where I actually feel like I have to have it. Like some people may want alcohol or drugs. I've got to have my phone in front of me to see what's going on.
If we were ever in the White House, there would be a scandal that somebody left behind some show prep in a cubbyhole.
It's what it is.
Get
really
the Secret
is.
Service in here for an investigation.
And this is interesting, and it wasn't my friend Dennis that has asked me this, but other people say, how do you stand it? How can you do it every day? It's got to get you. Like, no, it's an addiction. The more that's out there, the more I want. And I said, once you make the decision to do this, because I never wanted to be in talk radio. That was not my goal in life. I fought it. I didn't like it for a number of years. Why didn't I like it? Because I was afraid. I was afraid that I could be publicly shamed because I didn't do my homework.
And now we publicly shame you for other reasons.
Exactly. That's, and because I've let every other aspect of my life go.
Right.
So there's plenty of ammo to throw at me on other aspects of my life.
Right. The figure skating.
The figure skating from yesterday. Yes, exactly. But I love it. I mean, because it doesn't do my health any harm. It's like, because you have that thirst. And the only problem with it is that, and you probably relate to this, I've got 6 or 7 books right now that I'm trying to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't have time.
Yeah.
And because I'm doing so much other reading for the show, that I just don't have time to read for enjoyment anymore. So what happens is, like next week, I'm flying to see Dad, and I'll be flying up a lot to see Dad because he's been in the hospital and rehab. He's doing okay, but I want to make sure I spend as much time with him. It's a 2.5-hour flight. That's my time to read.
Mm-hmm.
That's recreational reading is when I fly now, and I don't know if you call it speed read, but I can read very quickly, and I can get through a book. If I go there and come back, I can read an entire book.
Mm-hmm.
But I have like 6 or 7 books right now that it's like I've got to read.
There's
an urge to read it, and I just don't have the time.
I've been following this doctor for a long, long time, most of my life. Seuss is his last name, and there's like 3 or 4 of the books. One's about colors, a cat, some kind of hat.
With a hat, yes, exactly.
I don't think it's a MAGA hat. It could be a cat in a MAGA hat, but yeah, trying to get those done.
Let me ask you this. Do you know the first book you ever read? I do.
You mean aside from a children's book?
Yeah, besides a children's book. I mean, a book that you went out to get, I actually went to a book show. I was 10 years old, and I bought a book. So, I mean, the first, not reading for school or anything like that, the first book that I went out that I bought and read.
Well, I was into, and these really were geared towards children, but they weren't like Dr. Seuss books. I was into Encyclopedia Brown. You remember that?
Yeah.
It was kids' books.
Yeah.
But I guess because my dad was a military cop and taught law enforcement and investigated, and Encyclopedia Brown was about solving these little mysteries and things like that. I think. Oh, what was the first one that I went out and sought? I have to think about that, and on my own outside of school. I have to think about that for a minute, but it was somewhere in that age, between 10 and 12. It was somewhere around there.
The first book, and I saw it at a they were selling books, or I don't know if they were giving them away. I can't remember, but it was at my elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
The biography of a young Thomas Edison is the first book I read.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by it because it was when he was young and he worked on the train. He had his own business. He was selling, candy and peanuts and everything else. I'll just never forget, reading that. But it was really a young Thomas Edison. And then the next group of books, I think I bought them, was the Brains Benton Mysteries. And I can still quote you when Brains Benton tried to get out. He was doing, because Brains Benton they were in school, basically in high school, but they were detectives.
Yeah.
And Brains Benton was like the detective, and the principal caught him, what are you doing looking out the window? He's looking out the window, actually as the detective looking at somebody who was out in front of the school, and the principal came up to me and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm studying the meteorological phenomenon and find there's an accumulation of nimbocumulus clouds in the absence of solar radiation with an increased rate of condensation. So naturally, I expect a vertical precipitation of condensation at any moment now. But not being informed to the highest degree of accuracy, I find a difficulty in articulating for fear of deviating from the true path of rectitude."
Yeah.
I memorized that as a kid. I used to go around saying that to everybody. And what that means is it looks like rain, but I'm not sure.
Right.
And my cousin, younger than me, but when she was young, my cousin Kathy, whenever I see her now, family reunion, whatever, I've got to say that to her because I said that to her, over a half century ago. She goes, "Could you do that weather thing again?" I always tell my kids, when we see Cousin Gary, he's got to do the weather thing. Ask him to do the weather thing. So isn't it amazing how the brain remembers something like that? I mean, for 50 years, that thing is stuck in my head.
It was Lord of the Flies.
Oh, yeah, I read that as a kid, too.
Because my brother, the one that I talked about just now, about the first time he heard me on radio, he was having to do a book report on it, and I wanted to read it. But he couldn't let me have it because he needed it for the book report, to read it. And I was, frustrated. And every time I looked for it at the school library, I couldn't get it. And I don't know if it was a book fair or where I bought it, but I sought it out. And that would have been, I don't know, not 10 or 12. I probably would have been 8 or 10, somewhere there. I was really, really fascinated by it, the idea behind it. And it brought this thought to me. I remember it seeming almost like a horror movie kind of effect as I was reading it. Scary, and this idea of being stranded, this idea of no structure, right? Being a military brat, the lack of structure. I remember that, fear as I'm reading it, going, "Oh my gosh, this would be horrible." And that was the first one. And probably, again, it's, I don't know if it's set in terms of like memoirs and everything else. I didn't get into that until probably later in high school or maybe after high school, real autobiography things that meant something, to somebody who had an impact.
You know what I read at a real young age, too? I can't remember how old I was Animal Farm.
I was going to say Animal. That was the first thing that came to my mind when you asked me that question was, I think it was Animal Farm. Animal Farm was right after that. I was thinking about Animal Farm yesterday.
Young when I read that.
Yes. And it was hard to put together until all of a sudden the discussion around it, and it was like, oh, yeah, okay. Now I see it. Yeah.
866-98 Red Eye.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Surviving and thriving as an owner-operator has just as much to do with managing costs as it does with generating revenue. Understanding basic principles of operating costs can save you thousands of dollars a year. Costs are not the same each month. If 9,600 miles are driven one month and 10,000 miles the next, two different sets of costs apply for each month. For example, if your tractor payment is $1,850 per month and you drive 9,600 miles in the month, your tractor payment is costing you 19.3 cents per mile. Drive 10,000 miles, though, and that same payment will cost you 18.5 cents per mile. This is one of your major fixed costs while paying off a truck loan. The difference in this example is only a fraction of a cent, which may seem like small change, but it ultimately amounts to $960 more annually on the bottom line. Because though fixed costs do not go down over time, you can reduce your cost per mile with more paid miles. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics. Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Harley Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up following the bottom of the hour now with the initiation, the start, because it was just initiated yesterday, the start of the dismantling of the Education Department, and also DOGE, the challenge that Republicans are facing. You know, I'm looking here, National Review has a column, no one in Washington is serious about the debt. And they're talking about Republicans, too. Mm-hmm. They're not really serious. Mm-hmm. He said, because everybody talks about none of the entitlement system, none of the entitlement programs can be touched or changed at all.
Right.
And it's like, you're not serious if you believe that. But when you have, for example, and we talked about DOGE, and you don't hear them throwing out those huge numbers anymore as they were as recently as 2 weeks ago.
I think somebody reeled that in.
Because remember, you don't hear the $5,000 check coming back anymore.
Right.
You don't hear.
$4 billion a day.
Right, $4 billion a day, 1.4, $4 or $5 billion that we've saved, because there's an expectation that, well, my God, then it's going to be easy to make cuts, and nobody's really talking about making cuts yet, are they?
No.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning. All right, the challenge for Republicans now. We know the challenge for the Democrats, but the challenge for Republicans, for example, when you look at the two biggest things that are being talked about this week, one, the Education Department. What they're doing now, and I want to make this clear because at times people misconstrue when we get into our political analyst mode versus what we actually want done. Mm-hmm. Because we agree that the Department of Education should be gone.
Yeah.
Federal government doesn't need to have any input as to what states are going to do with education.
Right.
I believe that the federal government will spend too much money on education, where I think that should be the state that is mostly involved in it. But getting rid of the Department of Education and their influence and their mandates of what you teach in the states is wrong. And I've always disagreed with it. And since I've been a talk show host, I've wanted the Department of Education to be gone because it doesn't do anything. We love it when they say, well, if the Department of Education isn't there, then how will kids be educated? You mean the worst test scores ever that we currently have now? Are you saying we've done the federal government being involved has somehow saved education?
Right.
You can't make that case.
No.
The federal government, especially under liberals. Remember Obama trying to get rid of the school choice in Louisiana?
Yeah, they sued Louisiana. They had to back down from it.
They backed down on it because it was so popular with minorities.
Right. That's about that time when who'd you say it was?
The chancellor of the Washington, D.C. school stepped down.
Yeah,
because she said,
the unions don't care about actual education.
Right. And the Democrats are supporting the unions and don't care about kids' education at all. You finally, I think, it's almost as close to a quote as you could get, but I remember she said, you either are for the unions or for the children, and I'm for the children.
Right. Yeah.
And her point was the unions aren't for the children. We'll have the audio coming up from Randy Weingarten yesterday, who was saying, I wanted schools open by April of 2020. Absolute lie. Mm-hmm. She did everything she possibly could to keep schools closed, but we'll get to that here. But the Department of Education, Trump cannot get rid of it. So much of it is grants that have been put out by Congress.
Yeah.
The problem is you have no votes to lose in the House.
Right.
And how do you get 60 votes in the Senate?
Right.
I don't know how you get there.
I don't know how you. I don't see that happening.
And so
the current makeup.
I still think the odds are against the Department of Education disappearing in the Trump administration.
Yeah.
I just don't see the votes that are there for it, because they will pound on the fact that the Department of Education is absolutely necessary. And what do I base that opinion on? Because I hope it doesn't go that way, because I want it gone. I base it on when I knew we were never going to get the debt under control in this country. And I think it goes back to 94, 95, when the Republicans, so we're going back 30 years ago, when the Republicans wanted to reduce the rate of growth of Medicare and school lunches, the school lunch program.
Yeah.
Because every single lunch was being subsidized, and the Republicans said, well, that's not necessary in the richest districts.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to do that. Well, they couldn't get anywhere on that because they took a poll, and the majority of Republicans thought that the federal government subsidizing the school lunch program was a wonderful thing. And I remember saying it at that time on the air. I was working in Buffalo, New York at that time, and I said, we'll never get the budget under control.
Right.
Because if Republicans think that way, you can't do it. The public, of course they know that debt is bad. But the problem is, if you attempt to cut any of their programs, it's always somebody else.
Yep.
And the problem with Doge, and thanks to the couple of listeners who wrote and said their fear, and it's my fear also, don't oversell and underdeliver. Undersell and overdeliver.
Yeah.
And when you see these numbers that they're talking about, and you can get the impression that this is easy to cut all the waste. We cut the waste. We're up to $1.45 trillion that we've saved the American public right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we went to the website. It doesn't say that, but they threw that number out when they said we're saving you $4 billion a day, because you simply do the math on that and multiply it times 365. And you say, well, that's this amount. Well, if you've actually saved this amount, you've saved the country. You don't need to do anything more. You've saved the country. Well, now they've backed off on that amount. They've backed off. Remember the excitement. Everybody getting back $5,000, $5,000. Mm-hmm. They stopped that. Why? You'd have to ask them. But
one of the things that I pointed out was that you put the GOP, and I don't necessarily have a problem with this. The question would be, does President Trump have a problem with this? You put the GOP in a corner. If you're saying we're accomplishing $4 billion a day and the GOP can't get one thing off of that list introduced into a continuing resolution, or they're seemingly not acting on it, and whatever happens in reconciliation,
yeah,
you need to have some Doge things in there. Otherwise, you don't mean it. But if you're claiming something that's hyperbole and you can't back it up, you're basically forcing the GOP to either ignore what you're claiming or to go full on with those, at least some of those cuts that you're talking about, and they couldn't get that done. When you have that, well, you have a GOP. I think Speaker Johnson so far has been behind Trump. It is Trump's agenda. I know he knows that. I know the back and forth with, making the cuts, and then, well, if you don't agree with this, we're, fiscal conservatives are now being shunned in a few cases. We're gonna primary against them. That has to end. That has to end, because the president has an agenda. I think everybody wants the same, but in order for that agenda to be carried out, he's going to have to do all of the whipping of the votes, which I think he did on the CR.
When the message, when people are being the message being communicated to them is, it's really not that hard to cut. There's so much waste that we're now up to $1.45 trillion in just waste, and nobody will be hurt if we make these cuts, and then there are no cuts coming from Congress. That's going to hurt you down the road.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the Democrats have no ideas right now. None. They have no ideas. The only thing they're depending on is that the Republicans will way oversell and underdeliver what they have told the American public they will do. Mm-hmm. The problem is entitlements will take up close to 50% of the budget. And then, as we know, you've got $1 trillion just on the interest on the debt alone, expected to be $1.2 trillion on top of all the entitlement programs that take up so much, do you really have those cuts?
Right.
Because what Doge says on the website didn't match the rhetoric of the $4 billion a day. So what's going on? Why are you doing it? And if you can do it, because this would be the big question, if you're saying we can do it and it's all waste and we don't have to touch or revise or do anything to any of the entitlements, we don't need to do anything to Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security except cut out the waste.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody will lose a benefit. And you can't make those cuts. The public might hold you accountable for that. And that's the only thing the Democrats have right now is if the Republicans are overselling and underdelivering. That's going to be the problem in 2 years with Congress.
Yeah. Right.
They have nothing of their own. The only thing that they have is, are you overselling and underdelivering?
Yep. And you can't do that. You absolutely cannot do that.
And that's the challenge that they have. I want them to do everything that they're doing.
Yeah.
But it's not my vote you're looking for. We keep going back to it. What changed this past election was the 10 to 20 million people who said, we're going to vote this other way.
Mm-hmm.
And they're independents.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not solid conservatives at all, even though they have they may have some conservative mindset to them. And everybody's against cutting the budget except if you get cut.
Yeah.
And you're telling the American public you can cut and because if you could cut $1.45 trillion and not affect anybody, you've saved the country.
It would be massive.
Right. You've just completely.
Well,
and as you know, I said, we hope it's true. We hope you can do that.
There's zero reason why you shouldn't do it if that's true.
Right.
If you can do that. But that's the problem. Is that there's concern that it's overhyped. Because where would be, for the GOP, we know why the Democrats would vote against it. Where would be any reason to vote against that?
Well, when I was seeing the other day, I forgot who was Lutnick or whatever, and it's true because of how the GDP is set up. He said, look, one of the challenges we face is because we're cutting so much that government spending helps, pad the GDP.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, fine, but where are the cuts?
Right. Yeah. You still have to go through that.
Where there are no cuts as of this moment.
Right.
None.
Right.
Well, there were some cuts. Wow. But the spending outdid what the cuts were. The cuts were minor, where we ended up spending $10 billion more in the continuing resolution.
Right. But adjusted for inflation, yada yada yada, blah blah blah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge that the Republicans have because the Democrats don't have anything.
Yeah. And
that's what I get from more of our listeners. Are they overselling this? And I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it is a legit concern. If you're overselling and underdelivering, that'll be a problem come the midterms, and that will be a problem in 2028.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just on those two particular issues.
Right.
But other than that, the public says they want the cuts. They just don't want the cuts to affect anything that will deliver benefits to them.
Right.
And so we've heard nothing on reconciliation and what they're looking at in the House right now, have we?
No.
We have nothing. I've heard nothing on that whatsoever, and they've got to get moving on that. And can they do it? And do you have the votes? Because it's so slim to get rid of the Department of Education, to actually have it where they don't have an influence anymore, and that the money may be flowing from the federal government, but it'd be in the form of the grants for states to do what they want with it.
Well, I don't think you have the votes in the Senate, but even in the House, I don't know if you have the votes in the House.
Neither do I. You're not going to get one Democrat vote for it.
No.
Now, one Democrat's going to vote for eliminating the Department of Education. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So you need every single vote in the House.
Right.
Well, you can give up a couple.
Maybe. Yeah, a couple, literally.
But that's a big thing when the Democrats are screaming to independents, those 10 to 20 million people who changed their vote in the last election. Those are when they're going to be pounding. They don't care about education. They don't care about education. They don't care about education. They don't care about education.
Right.
Because if the federal government isn't involved in it, then they don't care about the education, because only the federal government can save education. And I go back to the mid-'90s when the majority of Republicans, it was like 75%, thought the federal government subsidizing the school lunch program was something that had to continue. And I said, if you believe that we should send money from our school districts, the taxpayers of our school districts, to Washington, D.C., to fly around that bureaucracy that then hand out money back to the states for the school lunch program, and you believe that's how things should be done, we're never going to get the budget under control.
Right. And here we are.
Yep. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So after all that we just spewed out, how are they doing on no taxes for Social Security? Because all I want is my fair share. All I want is what's coming to me. All I want is my fair share.
Yeah. All right.
From a Charlie Brown Christmas, by the way, just so people know.
Yeah.
But that's a challenge that we face when you take. We've done it. We've looked at the entire budget. When you take defense and all the entitlements and everything else, you're talking about the vast majority of the budget with interest now. Interest is $1.2 trillion out of roughly a $7 trillion budget.
Yeah.
So you see where that is right now. That's just interest on the debt.
Right.
And you get nothing out of it. So we'll continue with the discussion coming up here.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. So, we were talking about the challenge that Republicans face, and one of the things I've gotten from some of our listeners is don't oversell and underdeliver, undersell and overdeliver.
Or undersell and underdeliver like they've done.
Because that's the one thing Democrats don't have anything except if you fail or if you overhype something. Tammy wrote and said, I agree all around. We've already had two, quote, release the Kraken, end of quote, moments with the overhyped Epstein files and JFK files.
Yeah.
After each, I suggested provide the documents at the same time you make the grand announcement.
Right.
And it was interesting because it's the first thing I saw when I woke up last night to come into work. It was like, there it is. The files are released. Jackie did it. She shot JFK under the chin, 99.9% verified. Like, oh, God. Here we go.
No. It was...
Oh, no.
It was never not going to be like this when you release the files. It was always going to be this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, you won't see any legal analysis for a while, if any, because those, we talked about, we mentioned Margot Cleveland. We talked about her yesterday and some of the great work she's done over the years. But some of those great legal minds, and this is not necessarily a legal setting, but quite often you'll see those great legal minds jump in and say, "Okay, here's what I've drawn. Here's what the takeaway for me from whatever it is." And I thought, do you dare do that if you're somebody like that? Because you're jumping in right away. You're jumping in with all the conspiracy theorists. There's no way you're not. The pool is filled with them, and you're going to be one out of, you'll be the 1% out of those 99% in that pool. And I don't know that any of them want to engage. It'll be interesting to see.
I am amazed that I haven't seen much at all on it, even from the, if you want to say the quote, so-called conspiracy theorists out there. And the ones that I've seen, like I said, the Jackie one was actually humorous. I mean, I just burst out laughing.
Yeah.
It's like, stop it. But the Wall Street Journal did a story on it, 5 takeaways from the new JFK assassination files.
Okay.
And talk about how the Trump administration released more than 30,000 pages previously classified or censored documents relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, providing insight into some of the CIA's most sensitive operations over the decades. Now, does anything relate to who killed Kennedy and sent it in a different direction? They don't say it. They said the Warren Commission in 1964 found that Kennedy was killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. By the way, that was also one of the first books I ever read as a child. When that came out in 64, I would have been 9 years old. My father got the book. I read it. Here are the 5 takeaways from the new documents. The inquiry into Kennedy's assassination swept up thousands of documents about CIA operations globally, and officials weighed the potential explosive fallout to spy programs from some potential revelations in one 1995 assessment. There's a ton of stuff in there. It's not all from back at that time.
Right.
A CIA official argued that acknowledging the CIA station in Tunisia way back then would harm the country. Then the CIA spent years probing whether Fidel Castro was involved. More than a decade after the Kennedy assassination, the CIA conducted a multi-year investigation into whether Cuban leader Fidel Castro was involved. The probe found no definitive proof that the Castro regime was implicated, but a newly released document lists in granular detail a years-long campaign of CIA-sponsored sabotage and assassination attempts targeting Castro. The Cuban leader was enraged when he learned of CIA-backed efforts to attack the sugarcane industry and set off bombs in the sewage system during one of his speeches. CIA operatives, with the help of the American mafia, also agreed to attempt to kill Castro for $100,000. But that actually is old news, is it not?
Yeah.
The Mexican president, number 3, what they've learned. The Mexican president was secretly close to the CIA. One document describes President Lyndon Johnson being briefed on the close personal relationship between the CIA's station chief in Mexico and the Mexican president at that time, who was the best man at the spy's wedding. Johnson was told not to mention this to the Mexican president. The Mexican president was publicly outspoken against Washington's intervention in Cuba, but was quietly involved in CIA telephone surveillance operations in Mexico City, and had previously told the station chief that he was delighted that a decision had now been made to get rid of Castro, according to another document. That's number 3. Number 4, what we've learned. In 1963, the CIA set up eavesdropping equipment on a house in a wooded area of Bethesda, Maryland, where 2 Cuban exiles were set to meet with American officials, probably including Attorney General Robert Kennedy. The memos describing the operation showed the human side of espionage with details about equipment failure, navigating payments and paperwork, the handling of unexpected changes to surveillance targets. This included concealing a tape recorder in the attic, basement, or garage, with electronics running more than $28,000 at today's prices. So there you go. At one point, a vendor accused the CIA of reneging on a payment, but the equipment appeared to work satisfactory. And finally, the CIA in Mexico asked Washington to keep quiet about the Oswald recordings. Much of the remaining mystery surrounding Kennedy's killing involved Oswald's time in Mexico City in the months before the shooting and his meetings there at the Cuban and Soviet missions. The CIA recorded Oswald's phone conversations with officials from both of those countries, but claimed to have later destroyed them, according to a 1998 document. 4 years earlier, however, the CIA station in Mexico City asked for the agency to avoid releasing information about the Oswald wiretaps, arguing they could force Mexico to reassess its U.S. relationship, do whatever is possible to keep the lid on the box regarding previous joint ops with the Mexicans. The CIA Mexican station told the headquarters. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what the Wall Street Journal has gotten from their early assessment of all the documents. Well, nothing at all relates to.
Right. It's
that there was a different shooter or the CIA was behind it, because I did see that when that one appeared. The CIA did it. It's clear now from the documents. The response was, the community notes even said, "Oh, there's not. There's nothing in there that says that."
Well, and then it, again, as you mentioned, you wake up last night, Jackie did it. Well, are you saying Jackie was with the CIA? I mean, it's.
I did laugh at that one. I will say that got me to laugh.
Yeah.
So, and we were even told, with the Epstein files and with, and this, there's going to be some things out there that people are going to go, oh my gosh.
We're going to learn a lot.
And it was like.
I don't think we've learned much of anything.
No. What are there, 50,000 pages still? Because they had 80,000 total, so only 30,000. I did see this, though. Somebody was making the case that the majority of the documents were already released during the Biden administration. A lot of it was duplicates of that. That's why.
Yeah, the documents that have been released so far.
Right.
Yeah.
The documents that they released were already released. A lot of them, I don't know if every one was, but the allegation was a significant portion of them, and they were lining the documents side by side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so a lot of this was already released. Now, they didn't know how many pages because there's so many.
Right.
But that's one thing that they had found, that there were some pages that were the same that the Biden administration had already released.
Right.
So, but we're no closer.
No. No, if we were, we would have known probably within 48 hours of the release. That it would have been the story. If there was something brand new that told us about who was actually responsible, something we didn't know before, we'd know. It would be the story. Would it be covered differently? Well, by different news organizations? Of course. Because Trump released it. So liberal activist news organizations, yeah, we learned who's behind the assassination, but since Trump released it, we can't trust it.
So since Trump has become president, we haven't learned anything really new in the Epstein files or the JFK files. Not that he's responsible for it, but I mean, that was part of the expectation of transparency. If he's releasing them, he's releasing them. And also that there are no extraterrestrials, no evidence of extraterrestrials. We've learned that since the beginning.
Yeah, there are.
The Trump administration.
His name is Mark Zuckerberg. He practically glows in the dark. If he's not from another planet, I don't know who is. Or
it would be nice if there were extraterrestrials. So, I mean, I would. Or I would. It would give us something else to talk about.
Do we no longer care about any of the stuff?
I don't think we do. I don't think, even when there was all the hype of what are these things that they're spotting, and everybody's like yawn.
Well, I mean, even with the JFK thing, you pretty much have to be our age or older to have a great concern. I think there probably are some younger than us that have an attitude that we should know the truth behind everything. But when you factor that in, let's say the files that were released the other day gave us, like, oh my gosh, the evidence, right? And it changed everything. How would you not still have the fray? How would you not still have people that were engaging in the conspiracy theories? Oh, this is what they want you to believe.
Yes, exactly.
But actually, it was the aliens that killed them. It's...
Well, but remember, we already got that from the 60s from Project Blue Book.
Well,
that 60s and 70s, that the government, there were people in the government that wanted the public to believe there were extraterrestrials to hide the secret aircraft that the United States was developing.
Right. Well,
so the opposite
exactly
conspiracy theory became true.
Well, and then Ventura would be out there. Why don't you tell me what's going on? It'll never stop because it got to this point. It will always be at this point, and people will, how many documentaries on JFK? So-called documentaries. I guess you could call them partial documentaries, but you don't know what to take from it. They're everywhere. And what do? I believe, what I believe. Everybody basically engages in their own belief of whatever story it is. And so I don't know that any amount of documents or any amount of proof would change that for a number of them.
Well, there's always the thing that one person couldn't pull it off alone. One person can't do it. And then we see what happened to Trump last summer.
Yeah, right.
So is that one of the reasons why there aren't as many conspiracy theories? Because the public now understands, well, even with the sophistication, think about that, 1963 compared to 2024.
Well,
when that attempt happened, how in the hell could somebody get that close to a president in 2025 with all the technology that we have? And it comes down to incompetence.
I say this and have for a long time, to where it's sadly almost become a catchphrase around my house. My wife hears it probably too often. She's probably sick of hearing it. Incompetence kills people.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes hard to believe and hard to buy into that it's simple incompetence. And that kind of incompetence at that level is beyond tragic. What happened to the president last summer should never, ever, ever even come close to happening. And yet it did. You had people on the ground that saw the shooter before the authorities did.
I know.
How in the hell does that happen?
I know.
We said then, well, any conspiracy theories surrounding that, actually, we can't dismiss any of that because this is so insane. Somebody tell me exactly how that happens.
Because it's tough to buy incompetence when you're talking Secret Service, right? It's tough to buy that argument.
We've grown up believing that the Secret Service is ironclad.
Yep.
By the way, thank God for our friend and former colleague, Dan Bongino, now serving in the FBI. Hopefully he'll help straighten some of this out at the FBI.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning and welcome. We talk about the JFK and, JFK, Epstein, UFOs, because UFOs was big last year. And then when Trump got in, they actually asked the Pentagon, any evidence? Nope, no evidence of extraterrestrials. And the thing is, what I love about human society is we will get on one narrative and say it's the only one. For example, the narrative for extraterrestrials exist out there and they're visiting our planet is because there's so many billions of planets, and there are planets that are sort of like Earth, that there has to be intelligent life out there.
It must be the case.
Right, it must be the case. And for me, it was reading, I think it was a book that came out about 20 years ago that said just the opposite. They said, no. What people are forgetting is how old the universe is, the millions upon millions of things that had to be done in order to create human life on this planet, that had to happen at a specific time period. It all had to happen. And they said the odds that that is happening elsewhere in the universe that's close enough to visit us is almost impossible. Now, I don't know which one is true, but when I heard that, I went, that's a solid theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, for example, if we didn't have the moon, none of us would be here. The moon changes everything. Having the moon, just one thing. But it's the time span of everything that happened, and everything, all millions of things had to happen precisely at the same time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not here.
Right.
Not that there may not be life, but for it to progress anywhere in the universe at the same rate that it did here to get intelligent life, or at a much faster rate where the extraterrestrials would be a million years ahead of us, said the odds are almost zero on that. And I went, I that's think an interesting theory.
If you look at the Zuckerberg theory, I think it's also sound. At one point, he wanted to turn us all into cartoons. I think that was the mission from his planet.
What was that called again?
I forget what it was, but their little virtual reality thing. It's just weird. It's like, we're not doing that. And then
forgot what that was called.
And why do you look so much like Data from Star Trek Next Generation, Zuckerberg? And his buddy, another billionaire, is afraid of that plan and is wanting to get us all to Mars as soon as possible, Elon Musk.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So the moral of the story is, let's come up with some new conspiracy theories. All right.
Look, the Zuckerberg thing, that's a sound theory. That's not necessarily conspiracy. We all watched it play out. It's true because he actually did those things.
All right.
Tell me where I'm wrong.
So here we go. The head of the teachers union, Randy Weingarten, had this to say yesterday on CNN about schools closing, because this is all about the education department and how she wanted schools to reopen as early as April of 2020. Here we go.
All right.
COVID was a terrible time for us. And as you know, because I was on your show a lot and other shows, I wanted schools to be reopened as early as April of 2020. The issue was the fear, and the issue was the safety issues.
Is that true?
No.
Let's go back because, of course, the internet exists. God, how do these people keep their jobs? God, it's like lying means nothing anymore.
Right.
Here we go. Let's let her rip. A bunch of different interviews with Randy Weingarten back then.
And if people are in high risk, they shouldn't be in school. They should be doing things remotely. Just because Donald Trump wants to take a risk with people who go to bars or beaches, those of us who have spent our life teaching kids are not going to take a risk with kids or with our members' lives.
By the way, that's July of 2020. Let's continue.
Remote and hybrid are really the only two ways you can reopen schools safely.
That's August of 2020.
You got to delay school opening because if you don't have the mask,
How are you going to be able to do this? There's a huge difference between working in Walmart and working in a school.
You know, even a situation like Florida, where it was pretty clear that schools should not reopen, and where Miami schools did not reopen because you had people who were courageous and who were willing to defy DeSantis's denials.
And that was September of 2020. Now this is November of 2020.
Why are they closing now?
Martha, they're closing now because what the city said, and frankly, what lots of other places are also seeing, is a huge skyrocketing increase.
Now
in the
you're
virus
not
surge.
listening to me. What they're telling us, though, is that the wisest scientific move is to have children in school.
Is that they're trying to figure out a regional way of opening and closing, like they did after
they
the
don't
Jewish
need to close.
holidays.
That's the point.
In the
They
middle
don't need
of
to close is the point.
Martha.
That when you hit that,
No,
it says a
the
measurement
mayor
established
said-
by the teachers
the
union
mayor-
over the summer in order to reach an agreement to reopen in the first place was a 3% threshold.
The mayor set the 3% threshold. What the teachers union did in New York City afterwards was to say, these are the safeguards that we need, and this is the testing we need.
Given that, all of these experts and scientists say that children are safer in school. It's worked across Europe. It's worked across the UK. They never closed their schools during their second spike, and now they're in recovery. They're down 10%, and the kids are not missing out on their education.
What they did in Europe and what they did in New Zealand is that they had national leadership that closed, that did masks, that actually closed the bars, that did some of those things, including the stimulus.
Yeah,
That's
given
what
all
we
that,
need
they
to
still
do.
say the kids are safer in school.
They're connected, Martha.
And it goes on and on and on and on, all the way to March of 2021. It continued to May of 2021.
This is not the topic.
It continued to, let me just continue looking at the date here, the date stamp, August of 2021. As we said, all the way up to 2022, Randy Weingarten was talking about keeping schools closed. So she's a pathological liar now, trying to say she wanted schools reopened from COVID as early as April of 2020.
Right.
Good God. Jeez. I mean, what a pathological liar. It was so obvious. The internet exists.
Yeah. And
people record.
It's and it was a big deal. She was the face, obviously, of the union, and she was getting tons of airplay back then. How could you just ignore that? Well, if you don't care about the truth. I mean, we've seen it happen with people on the left. I don't know how many times in our careers. Remember when Barney Frank? No, I've always said people shouldn't buy a home. They should just rent. The phones, he was on CNBC when he said it.
Oh, my God.
The phones at CNBC crashed.
Remember that? It was like, what a pathological liar. I mean, it was unbelievable.
You were pushing against it when then Treasury Secretary Snow in September of 2003 was saying, Fannie and Freddie cannot sustain this.
And what was he saying?
And he was saying, no, the problem is we need to increase it.
Yep.
We're not doing enough of it.
Yep.
Because what they were trying to say is the ratio, if you had this overwhelming ratio of good paper, good loans, versus bad, then it wouldn't be a problem at all. It's like saying, well, most of your tire's intact. It's that small hole. You should be fine. And this is who the left is, though. They go back, and he's, he was part of Barney Frank and the left. They were setting all of that up. But if it doesn't work in your favor, my question is, why try and do the turn now? For Randy Weingarten, why? What is it you're trying to, if you weren't crushed back then, if you didn't lose your position back then,
why?
If professionally you didn't suffer through that, why would you bring this up now?
Why get caught in a self-evident lie that anybody can look at what you said?
Right.
When it exists out there that directly contradicts what you're saying now.
Right.
Why would you put yourself in that position?
Right.
What is the advantage of doing it? Why are you even talking about it? Why are you bringing up COVID?
Right.
We know she's screaming about the Department of Education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But why would you at all want to get tied up in talking about what you wanted done during COVID?
You let that sleeping dog lie.
Yeah.
I mean, for as long as you possibly can.
You just pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
Wow. That was just bad.
I mean,
that was bad.
You say it this way, at the very least. With the information we had at the time, that's what we thought. We thought we were doing the right thing.
Yeah, and then you move on.
And then you move on. I'm not saying that would be believable for us. I'm not saying those who were harshly criticizing her and everybody who had their hands in on the COVID control thing. We didn't buy into that, and we never will. But you could at least get away with that in the media. They'll let you get away with that was the information we had at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Just do that.
Even Fauci did that. Well, my bad. Sorry, I guess I was wrong. You weren't just wrong. This is the whole investigation, by the way.
Oh, but the best thing is you've got the members of, Bhattacharya, who was the other? I can't think of the other doctor. Mm-hmm. They're all part of the administration now, the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And then you saw where the IRS basically has promoted the two whistleblowers.
Yeah.
You saw that.
Yeah.
They're going to look they're going to look into a bunch of different stuff inside the IRS. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
We didn't even get to the IRS one. That's Gary Shapley, and I can't remember the other guy's name. They're the ones that looked and said, no. They're, they wanted to let Hunter Biden go, but now they've promoted them. That's excellent,
right?
And the fact that Bhattacharya is ahead of the NIH now, and that they're bringing people in who questioned the lies, because we knew by that time, they knew it. They had the same information that the Great Barrington Declaration had, that Bhattacharya was a part of. And they, including Fauci, attempted to destroy their reputations.
Yeah.
And they were right on everything.
Right. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Is Randy Weingarten worried about having to testify in front of Congress? I mean, I don't know where they would go. It would just be a series of, questions that would ultimately make her look bad. I don't know how she could look any worse. I mean, it would just kind of bring everything up again. Maybe expose it to people who aren't aware, but we all lived through it. We all saw it. Apparently, except her.
I think a lot of us go back, because it's, 5 years ago, and we just think about it because you and I were in this studio, and we just remember. And it was probably right about this time, we're here on the 21st, and you think about it, everything was closed about 10 days, before we got to this point. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming in, and we were handed those letters. Mm-hmm. The letters that said, that we're going to and from work.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was insane.
That no law enforcement agency was about to start enforcing.
Right. Our company, they produced a letter.
Well, here in Texas, I mean, if your kids were playing together in Michigan, the governor of Michigan was going to send them.
No, there were places I think it was Dallas County, where you couldn't have more than 4 kids playing together.
Well, no, I mean the law enforcement officials. They on something like that.
Oh, yeah, the law enforcement.
Whether you were traveling to work or the store or anything like that. Yeah. Our governor wasn't about to send the state police after you. That wasn't going to happen.
You remember all that. And then by the time we got, think about this, because the Great Barrington Declaration came out in August of 2020. Mm-hmm. Remember the Thanksgiving. Remember the advice. Remember in different states, cops were going up to people's doors if there were a few cars outside of their house.
Yeah.
Yet the whole policy was to keep people in their houses, not let them go outside where you're less likely to spread it. I mean, it was nuts.
Yeah.
When you look back at it,
it was insane.
It was absolutely insane what we did.
Yep.
Well, I won't say we, because you and I didn't do it, but what you had governments around the country do. Remember the people that were busted? They were sitting in their cars.
Yeah. Right.
For church service.
Yeah.
But they were in their cars.
In their cars. Right. I mean, it was all over the place. Here in Dallas, we did have plenty of activists. Clay Jenkins Judge Clay Jenkins on the Dallas County Commissioner, who wanted to impose in fact, he tried to, and the other Dallas County Commissioners came out and said, no, you can't do that. The $1,000 fine, was it for a mask? I don't remember if it was for a mask, but it applied to one of the infractions, and they said, no, you can have the mandate or whatever, but there cannot be an enforcement of a $1,000 fine. We're not about to start fining the people of Dallas County $1,000 a pop for that. Not going to happen. So they pulled it back like a day after. Thank God for people that saw what was actually going on. Not that they're conservative, but you can't do that to people.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. All right, I just scanned the Babylon Bee.
Yeah.
CIA's JFK files clearly prove CIA destroyed all their incriminating JFK files.
Yeah,
oh
exactly.
God, that's hilarious.
I like their other headline on that the other day. It was CIA files, JFK files clearly prove that JFK was killed by seed oils.
Oh, missed that one.
Yeah.
Oh. Democrats say fire at Tesla facility likely caused by climate change.
Yeah.
Coming up following the top of the hour, the NTSB says lack of a vulnerability assessment by Maryland officials preceded the deadly Key Bridge collapse. That's the headline. Mm-hmm. Really fascinating. I didn't see it. You told me that you saw the representative, the NTSB. Seemed like she was pretty ticked off.
Well, she was clearly very passionate, especially at the end, one of the last questions. And she's basically getting back to the fact that there should have been an assessment. And over the years, plenty of opportunity for that type of assessment. Because all of us laymen looked at that situation and said, well, how does that happen? And, we were curious to see what the NTSB would find. And we'll go over that coming up.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here, as always. We made it to the Friday show.
We did.
I saw this yesterday, and I said, the Trump administration needs to continue this. And I think this was a calculated decision. What they did was, instead of just the president being there with Elon Musk, or Elon Musk tweeting how much is being saved, they're actually taking the tech people that are behind changing things in these departments to make them more efficient. Mm-hmm. And this seemed to have started yesterday when they had a guy by the name of Sam Korkos, special advisor to the U.S. Treasury Department, talking about, this is the tech guy. This is the guy who's in there, actually looking at the systems and saying, here's where we can make it much more efficient. And he's in the process of doing it. Here's part of the interview that he did yesterday on Fox News. Here we go.
Modernization program in particular, as well as the operations and maintenance budget. I really care a lot about this country, and this is a huge program that's currently 30 years behind schedule, and it's already $15 billion over budget.
Wait a second. Explain to our viewers what the program is in layman's terms.
Yeah, so the goal is to take, the IRS has some pretty legacy infrastructure. It's actually very similar to what banks have been using. It's old mainframes running COBOL and assembly. And the challenge has been, how do we migrate that to a modern system? Virtually every bank has already done this, but we're still using a lot of those same systems. And typically in industry, this takes a few years, maybe a few $100 million. And we're now 35 years into this program. We've actually been, if you ask them now, it's 5 years away. And it's been 5 years away since 1990. It's supposed to be delivered in 1996, and it's still 5 years away.
In your area of expertise that informs your ability to do this review is what?
I'm a software developer by background, and I'm a CEO of a software technology company.
So when you came into the department, the first thing you do is just get into the guts of the system and see how it operates?
Yeah, really talk to the software developers. Talk to the people on the ground and what they're seeing. I think one encouraging thing is we actually have quite a lot of software talent on the ground, the people writing code. We actually have quite a lot of good people. It is almost always the case that when I ask them what the correct answer is, how do we solve these problems, they're almost always right, which is good. They just haven't been in a position to be empowered to make those decisions. So
that's what happens in a monopoly. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of spokesperson you need, because that isn't hype and hoopla.
Right.
Here's what we're doing. Here's the problem. They've been saying another 5 years. They've been saying another 5 years since 1990 when this program started. It was supposed to be done by 96. They still haven't gotten there.
We're always 5 years away.
Right. 35 years, they can't get it done. Why? Because the people that can actually get things done, they won't empower them to actually do it. And he says, we've actually got the tech talent there in the government to do it. Mm-hmm. They just haven't been given the authority to do it because of the massive bureaucracy that we just know they. I think that what came out last year, that liberalism has gotten to the point where they can still tax you and they can still get the money. Mm-hmm. But when we looked at broadband, they haven't hooked up anybody in 3 years, 4 years. They couldn't hook up anybody because of DEI and the bureaucracy. All the regulations made it so they couldn't do something as simple as having billions of dollars to ensure that there's broadband in rural areas, and they haven't set up one person.
Right.
In that length of time, that's what happens when you have a monopoly.
Yep.
It's that simple. That's what happens. And that's what happens when the bureaucracy is just overrun with regulations to the point, because that to me is the most ironic thing where liberalism has gone, with all the regulations that they've thrown out. Climate change, DEI, this, everything else, that they can actually still collect the money and tax you and get that money and have that money sitting there, but they can't do a damn thing with it.
Right. Well, the DEI effect and the fact that the left has used big government and the bureaucracy as a jobs program as well.
Yep.
You know, when he says there's enough tech talent, and most of the time the solutions they have are correct, but they just don't have the power to implement what needs to be implemented. Well, I can see the bureaucracy just saying, whoa, 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 whoa. This would affect too many jobs.
To go to the next example here, but first off, I just want to say the administration needs to get these people out there talking about it.
Yeah.
Because you put these people on MSNBC and they're like, we're not the political people. We're the ones that are telling you what the problem is. If you want to talk to the political people, talk to the Treasury Secretary, whatever. This is what I'm here for. I'm here to tell you what the problem is, what the goal was, how they never reached the goal, and why they didn't reach the goal, because I'm the person that's supposed to solve the problem. I'm not the politician.
Right. You want a solution? I gave you a solution.
Right. I'm the solution guy, and here's the problem. And you send them everywhere.
Yeah.
And you take that from all the different departments, and maybe that's what they're starting to do here. Because when I saw that yesterday, I went, oh, that's good. That's what you've got to do. And that was on Fox News. But you need to send them out to other places. They need to be holding press conferences.
Yeah, sure.
You know, we want to introduce this person here. Let them do the explaining of what the problem is instead of Trump and Elon Musk.
Yeah, right.
Not that they can't introduce them, but let them do the talking. Let the people who are doing the work and can explain to you what the problem is and come out and say, we're not the politicians trying to sell you this. Our job is to fix it. And here's the problem. Here's a solution. And here's why it wasn't solved.
Right.
As he did right there.
Right.
And he did that. That was 1 minute and 45 seconds long. And I went and saw that. And I'm sure anybody else who saw that went, are you kidding me? Well, that's the kind of person we need in there to solve the problem.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
That's what you're saying. These are the tech people that are in there. And what the left is doing, and they did it yesterday, everything is still about race, and that they wish to enrich and make. Trump is doing this to enrich all of his buddies.
Right.
That the whole goal is for Trump to enrich himself and to enrich Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Well,
how's that going?
Well, it's not going well for them because both Trump and Elon Musk have lost a tremendous amount of money by being involved in public service. So you can't make that argument.
Right.
But that's what they're trying to do. Don't play the same game back. If you understand that it gets to a point where the rhetoric, because this is where we talked earlier about overselling and underdelivering. You know, we're saving this amount of money, $5,000 checks. You don't hear that anymore. It's gone. Should have never been brought up. Don't oversell. As a couple of our listeners said, no, in fact, undersell and overdeliver. And as you said, well, what we've been doing is underselling and underdelivering.
The GOP is known for underselling and underdelivering.
And so you show people that this is a work that's being done. It isn't all politics. It isn't just, they're taking a chainsaw to everything like Mark Cuban yesterday. Mark Cuban said, well, they're doing it wrong. What they need to do, they need to calculate it, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
and I even commented on that when I said, excuse me, you said that you were in charge of the basketball operations. and you did that. You did that to convince the season ticket holders to stay with you with the change of the ownership with the Mavericks.
Right.
And then the Luka trade happened, and you went, well, I wasn't in charge. Well, you couldn't communicate one message.
Right.
One message you couldn't communicate to your customer. You need to go back, sit down on the bench.
Exactly.
That's what I wrote yesterday, and quite a few people commented on it. It was like, And then I put a nice smiley face. And then Elon Musk got a hold of it and said, why don't you help? And he said, okay. I went, ooh. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen. You think that Mark Cuban is going to attach himself to Trump? I don't see it.
I don't see that happening.
And this all came because it came out where he said that it could be cut. We could cut everything in a third.
Yeah, from 2017. Right.
Yeah, from 2017.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, but you have to do it with, there is no easy way to cut the bureaucracy of government. I don't care who you are. It's like the whole thing with, you saw the Jackie Robinson thing, right? Where he was removed but then put back again. Well, see, they want to take Jackie Robinson. No, it was a mistake that happened, and they put him back in.
Right.
Nobody wants to take Jackie Robinson and what he did out of it. And who said it the other day? Somebody said good God. They made the point, well, what proves DEI works is Jackie Robinson was a DEI player. No, he wasn't.
No.
You out of your freaking mind? It wasn't DEI.
No.
Jackie Robinson should have been in there all the time. It was racism that kept him out of it.
Right.
He was a DEI.
No, that's called talent, skill.
Exactly. I was like, what the hell? Stop it. Stop with the foolishness.
But you're making it worse on yourself when you say something stupid like that.
I saw that yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever, on social media. I'm like, what are you talking about? Jackie Robinson was a DEI player.
Yeah.
In that case, so was Michael Jordan, right?
Right. Yeah. All the greats. Sure.
I'm just like, no. God.
Right. But that's the left for you. Because the left doesn't recognize the work, the talent, the skill.
Yep. Well, when we want to talk about this too, the NTSB, that's one of the reasons I believe the NTSB works.
Yeah.
Because the scientists are in charge.
Yeah. Right.
That's why it works.
Yep.
It works. The reason people look at the NTSB and say, okay, I trust them.
Right.
Is because the person who's the head of it understands the science.
Yeah.
They're scientists.
Right.
They're not politicians.
Yeah, Jennifer Homendy, the chair yesterday with the press conference, basically that there should have been assessments all along the way.
Of the bridge.
Of the key bridge, those that may not remember. We covered that because it happened in the middle of the night, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, when it was hit by a ship, and then a massive, 1.6 miles of it essentially collapsed into the water. And the NTSB findings is that, first and foremost, and most immediately, that the owners and operators of bridges in, I think it's 19 states, need to do proper assessments right now.
Yep.
And that there should have been assessments going back many years for this. And one of the last questions was, well, what do you think about, and I'm paraphrasing here, the thoughts, asking Jennifer Homendy, again, the chair of the NTSB, what do you think about the thought of, this, it could only be, or I would call it excuse making, that the peer protection that they're recommending, which would have helped to prevent something like this, could only be implemented and only be put on with new bridges that are built. And I won't say she lost her cool, but she clearly had reached her end. It was the last question, but she was saying it should be existing bridges. In fact, you can see over the years how many times that was said and how many times, that was recommended. And state authorities, she's saying that they did not do what they were supposed to do here in the assessment. That's why, one of the first things that comes out is for the owners and operators of bridges that may be at risk in 19 different states here, you need to do this assessment now. You and I asked about it when we were covering this because it was as we watched, the footage and went back, there was a live cam that gave us some footage, at least a little bit of perspective, but a lot of questions more than anything. And we knew that, well, the NTSB will be involved and we'll get some answers then. But we were asking those basic questions as laymen. Well, how could you not have protections built in those shipping lanes around these bridges? And they should have done these assessments years ago. And that's why the NTSB now is urging the operators and owners of these bridges in 19 other states to do these assessments as quickly as possible to make sure that nothing like this happens.
Warning 30 owners of 68 bridges across 19 states to conduct vulnerability assessments.
Yeah. And so, but, she was frustrated. Look, the conversations were there. It was right. Some of this was right in front of you.
And of course you can put the supports that are needed
right
around an existing bridge. Of course you can. There isn't anything you can't do.
Exactly. Yeah. It may take a long time. It's a tremendous effort, very expensive, but well worth it and well worth the lives that were lost as a result of that bridge collapse.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on roadside inspections. Drivers must always be prepared for a roadside inspection. This means drivers should always have their personal, vehicle, and company credentials organized and ready and having any shipment paperwork such as bills of lading or hazardous materials shipment emergency response information organized and ready for the inspection official. Just an FYI, the top 2 violations written against drivers every year, as well as during Operation Road Check, are log general form and manner and log not current. Both are completely avoidable if the driver keeps the log accurate, compliant, and current at all times. Having the vehicle ready for inspection involves the driver conducting daily inspections and making sure any problems that are discovered are immediately corrected. Vehicle readiness also requires the company to make sure that the vehicle is current on all scheduled maintenance and that the maintenance schedule is adequate. This will make sure the driver is being given a sound vehicle to start with. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Yeah, the NTSB chair said yesterday the Key Bridge was almost 30 times above the acceptable risk threshold for critical or essential bridges, according to guidance from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation officials. You know, you were telling me that it was tough to hear the questions.
Yeah.
What
Right.
is, I got to complain again. You see it in sports. You see it many times at government press conferences. We are in 2025.
Yeah.
We have every kind of microphone known to mankind.
Right.
I can sit 20 feet away from my phone and talk to somebody who can hear me clearly.
Yeah.
Why the hell can't we hear what the reporter is asking the politician, or the sports reporter is asking the player or the coach? What in the world is wrong? That's the first thing that I would do, being somebody that's into sound, is making sure the sound is right.
Brian Regan has a stand-up special called Nunchucks and Flamethrowers. And he talks about it. He goes, especially like when the police are doing something, right?
Yeah.
And you hear this, and then the chief responds, yeah, we don't know how they broke out of there. And nunchucks and flamethrowers. Yes, we do believe they're still in that neighborhood somewhere. And it's
do they do it on it's almost like they're doing it on purpose. Like it's calculated.
Yeah.
Let's really tick off anybody who's watching that they can never hear the question, or the people doing the press conference don't want you to know what the question is.
At the White House the other day, I don't know who the reporter was, but he's holding a mic. And it's down in his lap where his mouth is not. And he's asking a question. It's like, hold the microphone up. Hold it up. You can do it. Come on.
Amazing.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. And then this week, in case you missed it, there was Tim Walz.
It's getting so bad. Now all you have to do is say Tim Walz. Oh, it's so bad.
I need to be doing the drug that he's doing.
Oh, my gosh, it's getting so bad. Put down the bong. Oh, my gosh. All you have to do is say Tim Walz. That's so funny.
And that interview, well, first off, the Gavin Newsom podcast is blowing up in his face.
As we said it would.
Because Democrats, they did a poll of Democrats in California. They hate it. Mm-hmm. And the reason they hate it, the last thing they want him to be doing is talking to MAGA people in a nice way.
Right.
And so he decided, okay, let's get some liberals on. We'll get Tim Walz on. And they start talking about Tim's masculinity.
Yeah.
And then he said that he could beat up Trump supporters.
Yeah.
This is where this got to. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing. Let's play it. Here we go. All right.
How do you fight it? This
I think I could kick most of their ass. I do think that if they wanted to. I know I can run them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. He
seriously did.
We said it earlier this week, but I mean, you got to mention it again. He's really ticked off. And we have said the only people that get ticked off, men don't get ticked off.
Right.
Normal men don't get ticked off if the opposition says, well, you're not masculine enough.
Yeah.
He's totally ticked off.
No, clearly.
Because my masculinity was being questioned. Now, we never questioned his masculinity.
Well, one of us did. And I'm not naming Eric Harley names.
Well, that was after he said it.
Oh.
We weren't doing it back during the campaign, is my point. We had fun afterwards questioning it. But we never said he's not a man, because that's a dumb thing that we wouldn't say until he brought it up. And then we had to have fun with it, right?
Yeah.
We had to have fun with it.
Kind of what we do sometimes.
We didn't say he's not a man. We said, this guy's nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we said.
Yeah, full on.
Now, we did mention his mannerisms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where he would, jump up and down and spin and throw his hands up into the air. And the first thing I thought of, and it wasn't based on whether somebody is effeminate or not, it was simply he was almost doing an impersonation of Richard Simmons.
Yes.
It's what it was. I
worked an event with Richard Simmons one time, part of a station promotion. It was exactly like Richard Simmons.
Well, and
a little like, at times like Chris Farley.
But Chris Farley was another one, because it was when Chris Farley came into that auditorium one time.
Yeah.
And you looked at it, you go, that fits it too. So it was simply the mannerisms. And as we said at the time, Richard Simmons really helped a lot of people. Yeah. He helped a lot of women, exercise, get out there and do it. And we always gave him credit for that. Mm-hmm. And he seemed like a genuinely nice guy.
Right. Yeah.
You met him, so.
He was more than accommodating and was very nice to people, except for the guy that he actually took the candy bar out of his hand while he was eating at the mall.
Oh, wait a minute. I did sort of hit him after also. It wasn't just you. Because remember, I said at the end, I went, I think Tim Walz has cooties.
Well, that's only because he has cooties.
I forgot about that.
Clearly has cooties.
But that was only after, again, his obsession with it.
Yeah.
I think I could beat them up. I think I could kick most of their asses.
Right,
I could do it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't stand a chance. You're 10 years younger than me, Tim.
Yeah.
And should I get into the little back and forth? I'm more masculine than you because I could beat you up, Tim.
Well,
and I'm older than you, Tim.
Here's the thing. I'm pretty sure I could bob and weave my way out of that sitting down, because I'm not standing up for it. I'm not going to get out of my chair. But I'm pretty sure I don't know if I could beat him. I would not want to. It's not my goal. I think it's a weird goal. But if he came at me, I'm pretty sure I could dodge.
My goal in life is not to beat up Tim Walz.
It's not one. It's not. It's not in the top 10.
I haven't. I've never broken 75 yet on the golf course. Now for 9 holes.
Yeah.
One time, I did shoot a 35. That if I could double that would have been a 70. I did shoot 35 one time.
I don't have
I blew up to 40. But I had a 43 in the front 9, 35 on the back.
Right.
So, but I've never broken 75 for 18 holes. Now that would be one of my goals, but my goal would not be to beat up Tim Walz.
I have 0 things on my bucket list. But if I had something, one of them would not be beat up an existing governor. I mean, it's not even
and then he
close.
Said,
I don't even think that. I'm not looking to beat anybody up.
And the best part is I can't play the next audio clip because he cursed in it.
Oh.
Which, again, that's been questioned. Why are all the Democrats cursing now? Because they're full of rage.
Yeah,
they're full of rage, and they don't know where to go. They don't know where their out is, and that's what you do when you're frustrated. But when he said that Trump supporters and Republicans are afraid and intimidated by his masculinity, that's actually the problem. It's like, oh, my God. You've got to be kidding me.
It is insane.
Now, my goal might be for you to be sitting in that chair and still beat him up.
I didn't say beat him up. I said I could bob and weave.
Wait, hold on.
I'm not
That's
throwing
right.
any
Wait
punches.
a minute. We don't want to be promoting violence on this show.
I'm not taking any swings.
Okay,
but I don't
we
think,
don't want to be promoting violence.
I don't think I would have to because I think he'd wear himself out, pretty quickly.
He'd be in the corner jumping up and down with the hands
it's like,
waving.
Like, Tim, are you done?
I'm tired.
Are you done now? Do you need a chair? I just, it's not.
We do not want to promote violence. I apologize there. See, I apologized.
Yeah.
I apologize for saying I'd want to see Eric sitting in a chair and beating him up.
Yeah, I'm not taking any swings.
Remember,
I wouldn't need to.
We are the nonviolent show. We are the first radio show, we believe, that took the official stand on the air that we are anti-murder.
Right.
We took that strong stand.
And anti-beating up governors.
Anti-beating
I don't want to beat anybody up.
This is so stupid.
Can't we all just get along?
But it's so much fun, though. It's like
it is.
Because you could tell, you can see it in his face when he said, I think I can kick most of their ass.
Yeah.
It's like, shh.
I'm
like, what's wrong?
How about you not? Just so awkward.
Oh,
really awkward. Yeah. I mean,
I was at home. I couldn't stop laughing. I mean, you ever get the giggles where you just can't stop?
Oh, yeah.
I kept thinking in my mind where he said, they're intimidated by my masculinity.
No.
That's it.
No. That's not a thing there, Tim. It's just not.
If Sly Stallone in his youth dressed up as Rambo?
Yeah.
You're going to intimidate me.
Right. Exactly.
What's his name? Dolph Lundgren?
Oh, yeah.
I heard he's like in remission. He had cancer or something.
Right,
Doing a lot better. Now, him in his prime, absolutely.
I was like 8 feet tall, I think.
Yes.
In the movie, he was 8 feet tall.
That would intimidate me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a highlight of our week.
It really was.
But, all right. So here we go. Attorney General Pam Bondi said yesterday charges against individuals participating in what she described as domestic terrorism against Tesla properties. The press release detailed charges against 3 individuals accused of engaging in these acts. Did you see all their mugshots?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was not intimidated by any of their masculinity.
I really wasn't. It was. That's a rough-looking crew. That's not something I said.
Right. One defendant per the press release, was arrested after throwing approximately 8 Molotov cocktails at a Tesla dealership located in Salem, Oregon. Another individual in Charleston, South Carolina, wrote what the release described as profane messages against President Trump around Tesla charging stations before lighting the stations on fire with Molotov cocktails. A third individual was arrested in Loveland, Colorado, and like the others, according to the reports, tried to light the Teslas on fire with Molotov cocktails. A report associated with the arrest in Loveland indicates that the words Nazi cars were written on the building. Each defendant faces serious charges carrying a minimum penalty of 5 years and up to 20 years in prison. The press release said, making it clear that the Trump Department of Justice is committed to ending all acts of violence and arson directed at Tesla properties and otherwise. In a statement paired with the release, the Attorney General said the days of committing crimes without consequence has ended. And I guess that would be the other audio cut that, do I have that? I think I may have it lined up here. The audio cut of the Daily Show the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And the comments that were that were made.
And while those comments were made, the crowd was cheering.
The crowd was cheering the actual, because the host, it wasn't Jon Stewart, the host was playing the actual TV news reports of what happened, and the crowd was laughing and cheering about it. And it was just, what in the world? You know, you realize the mentality, and we go back to the health insurance CEO who was murdered.
Yeah.
And the support and the justification that came out for his murder that was just reprehensible. You and I remember AOC and what she said.
Yep.
When she talked about the fact of, well, it's wrong, but you can understand it, because what you must understand is if you're denied a claim, well, that's violence towards you, thereby justifying the murdering of a healthcare CEO. Understand where the left is today. Here it is. I mean, this is the Daily Show. Here we go.
Jim, they're taking to the streets or the parking lots.
Tonight, the FBI and ATF now investigating multiple cases of possible arson targeting Teslas and Cybertrucks.
This dramatic video shows multiple cars in flames. Police say the attacker used Molotov cocktails. It's the latest in more than a dozen instances of arson and vandalism targeting Tesla.
The same suspect shot more Teslas with a gun. Tesla Cybertrucks were set on fire in Kansas City, and earlier this month, shots fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon. Cybertrucks on fire in Seattle.
Wow, you guys like petty acts of domestic terrorism, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Understand how easily.
Yep. They're on board.
People on the left support it.
Absolutely on board.
Yep. 866-90 Red Eye.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. Why? Our show ends an hour from now. It ends at 5 a.m. Central Time, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. And after that, what happens is our show is recorded, and it becomes our podcast. And so if you only catch part of the show and want to catch more of it, you can anytime that you want. And also, during the show, while the show is live, if you cannot listen to one of our great radio stations, you can listen to the show on our app live all 5 hours.
And thank you.
Of course. Coming up, another article on how the Biden administration, the LNG pause deception, how they did a whole thing on, for example, we producing natural gas here and then selling it to other countries. We wanted to export it. And the Biden administration said no, because it adds to climate change. They did their own report. The report said, no, it does the opposite. They hid the report.
Yep. They hit the report.
Hit the report.
Could have helped their own agenda, but is that really their own agenda? Is their agenda actually their agenda, or is something else the goal?
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.